Arizona Territory, 1878, a land where laws were still being written and broken. One man's desperate search for help would uncover a secret that some would kill to protect. They say a black man couldn't own land in those days. They say a white woman couldn't survive alone with children. They were wrong on both counts. Horse hooves approaching, then stopping suddenly. What you're about to witness isn't just a story of survival. It's a testament to the untold courage that built this nation from the shadows of history. When Elijah Freeman posted a simple notice for a cook, he never expected to find himself in the crosshairs of the territory's most dangerous men, or to discover that the quiet widow who answered held secrets that would change everything. Stay with me until the final chapter, because what happens when love, danger, and justice collide will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about the American frontier. If this story moves you like it moved me, hit that subscribe button and share it with someone who needs to hear the truth about our forgotten heroes. These stories deserve to be told. These lives deserve to be remembered. Welcome to The Black Rancher, where we uncover the buried stories of courage, resilience, and triumph from America's frontier. I'm bringing you the histories that textbooks forgot, the real stories of black cowboys, ranchers, and pioneers who helped forge the West. If this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. What you're about to hear might change the way you see American history forever. Now let's ride back to the Arizona Territory, 1878, where one man's quest for simple help was about to become a fight for everything he held dear. Arizona Territory, June 12, 1878. The morning sun blazed mercilessly over Copper Springs as Elijah Freeman tied his chestnut stallion to the hitching post outside Wilcox Mercantile. At 36, the tall, broad-shouldered man carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had survived far worse than the suspicious glares that followed him down the town's dusty main street. "Morning, Mr. Wilcox," Elijah said, as the store bell announced his entrance. His deep voice remained polite despite the storekeeper's perpetual frown. "Freeman," Wilcox acknowledged with a curt nod. "What brings you down from that mountain today?" "Need to post a notice," Elijah replied, laying a carefully written paper on the counter. "My cook left for California. Need a replacement." Wilcox scanned the notice with narrowed eyes. "Room and board included? Generous wages? Mighty fancy treatment for kitchen help. Hard to get folks to come all the way out to Stone Ridge Ranch," Elijah explained. 15 miles from town makes for a lonely posting." "Lonely's one word for it," Wilcox muttered, but he took Elijah's money and pinned the notice to the community board. "Can't imagine who'd want to work for a successful rancher," Elijah finished, his expression unchanging, though his dark eyes hardened. "Someone who needs honest work might appreciate the opportunity." Back outside, Marshal Donovan hailed him from across the street. Unlike most in town, the lawman treated Elijah with a measure of respect, if not friendship. "Hear you're looking for help up at Stone Ridge," he said, glancing at the newly posted notice visible through the store window. "Cook quit. Got family in Sacramento calling him west," Elijah replied. "Hard to run a ranch and manage a kitchen." "Wouldn't know," Donovan shrugged. "Town's got a restaurant and my wife makes a decent stew. But word of advice, Freeman," he lowered his voice. "Be careful who you bring onto that property. Folks still wondering how you came to own it." "I bought it fair with money I earned driving cattle to Dodge City for 8 years," Elijah responded, the familiar explanation tasting bitter on his tongue. "Papers are filed proper at the territorial office." "I know that," Donovan nodded. "But Harlan Crawford's been making noise again about those water rights. Says his daddy promised him that land." "Crawford's daddy lost that land in a card game to old man Spencer, who sold it to me legal." "Crawford needs to take up his complaints with his father's ghost." Donovan almost smiled. "Just watch yourself. I can't always ride out that far if trouble starts." Elijah tipped his hat and mounted his horse. "Been watching myself since the day I was born, Marshal." As he rode out of town, Elijah allowed his thoughts to wander to his empty kitchen and the even emptier rooms of the ranch house he'd built with his own hands. 5 bedrooms for a man who slept alone. A long table that never saw company. The bitter irony wasn't lost on him. He'd created the home he'd always dreamed of, only to have no one to share it with. Sullivan's saloon at noon, he muttered to himself, repeating the meeting place he'd specified in the notice. Let's see who shows up desperate enough to work for a black rancher in the middle of nowhere. He never could have predicted just how desperate or how remarkable that person would be. Sullivan's saloon quieted when Elijah entered precisely at noon the following day. He removed his hat, nodded to the bartender who reluctantly served him when necessary, and took a seat at a corner table facing the door. 3 men walked out immediately. Elijah paid them no mind. He'd grown accustomed to the silent protests of fragile pride. The first applicant was a grizzled drifter who reeked of whiskey and hadn't seen soap in weeks. "You got a still up there? Willing to work for liquor," the man slurred. "I need someone reliable," Elijah replied. "Good day to you." Next came an elderly man with arthritis-twisted hands who couldn't lift a cast-iron skillet if his life depended on it. As the clock approached 1, Elijah began to think his journey had been wasted when the saloon doors swung open, temporarily flooding the dim interior with harsh sunlight. A woman stood in the doorway, her slender figure silhouetted against the bright afternoon. Behind her, 3 children huddled close, a boy of about 10, a girl perhaps 7, and a toddler clutching her skirts. The saloon fell completely silent. She stepped forward with determined dignity, despite her threadbare dress and the visible exhaustion in her face. Pale blonde hair was pulled back in a simple bun, and her blue eyes held both fear and fierce resolve. "I'm looking for Elijah Freeman," she announced, her voice surprisingly steady. "About the cook position." Elijah stood, gesturing to the chair across from him. "That would be me, ma'am." She hesitated, then approached his table. "I'm Catherine Whitaker. These are my children, James, Ruth, and little Thomas." The oldest boy maintained a protective stance beside his mother, his young face already showing the wariness of someone who had seen too much hardship. "Mrs. Whitaker," Elijah acknowledged. "Please sit." "We just arrived on yesterday's stage," she explained, perching on the edge of the chair while keeping one hand on her daughter's shoulder. "My husband died 6 months ago. Consumption. We lost our home in Missouri." Elijah nodded, studying her face. She was younger than he'd initially thought, perhaps 30, but grief and worry had etched premature lines around her eyes. "The position is for a cook at my ranch," he explained. 15 miles from town, it's isolated work. "I can cook anything from scratch," she replied. "Bread, stews, pies. I managed a boarding house kitchen before I married." "And your children?" "They're well behaved and can help with chores. James is good with animals. Ruth can gather eggs and help in the garden." Elijah hesitated. He'd expected a single person, not an entire family. Yet something in the woman's quiet determination resonated with him. "Mrs. Whitaker, I should be clear. I own Stone Ridge Ranch. I built it and I run it with 3 hired hands. Some folks around here take issue with a black man owning one of the largest cattle operations in the territory." He watched her carefully for any reaction, but her expression remained unchanged. "Mr. Freeman, I take issue with starving children and nowhere to sleep tonight. If you're offering honest work and a roof, the color of your skin matters far less to me than the character that brought you success." Their throat cleared loudly from the bar. Harlan Crawford stood watching them, his hand resting meaningfully on his holstered pistol. "Careful now, widow woman," Crawford drawled. "You're new here, so you don't know what you're walking into. Freeman here's got quite a reputation." "For raising the finest cattle in 3 territories," Elijah replied, without looking at Crawford, "and for minding my own business." Catherine's eyes darted between the men, understanding the undercurrents. "Mr. Freeman," she said clearly, "if you're willing to hire me, we can leave immediately. I believe we've both heard enough from this establishment." Elijah studied her for a moment longer, then nodded once. "My wagon's outside. We'll stop at the mercantile for your belongings." "Everything we have is in those 2 bags by the door," she replied quietly. As they rose to leave, Crawford stepped into their path. "You know, Freeman, people might get the wrong idea about a white woman living at your ranch, territorial decency laws and all." "Mrs. Whitaker will have her own quarters in the cook's house," Elijah replied evenly. "And I trust the good citizens of Copper Springs have more important matters to attend to than spreading rumors about a widow trying to feed her children. He held Crawford's gaze until the man reluctantly stepped aside, then guided Catherine and her children outside to where his wagon waited. As they loaded the pitifully small bags, the oldest boy looked up at Elijah. "Mister, are we really going to live on a real ranch, with cattle and horses?" Elijah's normally stern expression softened slightly. "Yes, son. Over 200 head of cattle and a dozen of the finest horses you'll ever see." The boy's eyes widened. "I ain't never been on a horse before." "Haven't," his mother corrected gently. "Well," Elijah said as he helped them onto the wagon, "we might have to change that." As they pulled away from town, Catherine sat rigid beside him, her children huddled close. "Mr. Freeman, there's something you should know," she said finally, her voice barely audible over the wagon wheels. "My husband, he wasn't who people thought. There are men looking for us. For me. That's the real reason we left Missouri." Elijah kept his eyes on the road ahead. "Mrs. Whitaker, everyone at Stone Ridge Ranch has something they've left behind. It's not my business to ask what. All I need is honest work and respect for my property." For the first time, Catherine's composure cracked slightly, a single tear tracking down her cheek before she quickly wiped it away. "Thank you," she whispered. Neither could have known that the secrets she carried would soon threaten everything Elijah had built, or that the simple act of hiring a cook would ignite a chain of events that would change the Arizona Territory forever. Stone Ridge Ranch came into view as they crested a hill after nearly 3 hours of travel. The main house stood proudly against the backdrop of red rock formations that gave the property its name. A 2-story structure built of local timber and stone, with a wide porch wrapping around 3 sides. "You built all this?" Catherine asked, unable to hide her amazement. "Every nail and board," Elijah confirmed. "Took 4 years. Started with a 1-room cabin while I built the big house." Nearby stood a barn large enough for 20 horses, corrals, a bunkhouse, and a smaller cottage that Elijah pointed out. "That'll be your quarters. Cook's house, 2 bedrooms, kitchen, small sitting room. Previous cook was a bachelor, so you might want to make some changes for the children." As they approached, 3 men emerged from the barn. Miguel Ortiz, a skilled Mexican vaquero who had been with Elijah since the beginning. John Buffalo, a half-Navajo, half-black cowboy with an uncanny way with horses, and Charlie Watson, a white drifter who'd proven himself loyal despite initial misgivings. "Boys," Elijah called, "this is Mrs. Catherine Whitaker and her children. She's our new cook." The men nodded respectfully, though Charlie's eyebrows rose slightly at the sight of the children. "Mrs. Whitaker, these are my hands, Miguel, John, and Charlie. They live in the bunkhouse, take meals in the main house kitchen." "Pleased to meet you all," Catherine replied with dignity. "I hope you're not too particular about your food." Miguel grinned. "Senora, after 3 weeks of the boss's cooking, anything that doesn't taste like leather will be a blessing." This broke the tension, and even little Ruth smiled shyly. "Charlie, help with their bags," Elijah instructed. "Miguel, we need to check that south pasture before dark." As the men dispersed, Elijah showed Catherine and the children to their new home. The cottage was plain but solid, with simple furniture, clean linens, and windows that caught the afternoon light. "It's not much," Elijah said, suddenly self-conscious of the sparse accommodations. Catherine stood in the center of the main room, her hands clasped tightly. "Mr. Freeman, after weeks of charity beds and sleeping on stage station benches, this is," her voice faltered, "this is more than I dared hope for." James had already run to the window overlooking the corral. "Ma, look at all them horses." "Those horses," she corrected automatically, though her smile betrayed her pleasure at his excitement. "You get settled," Elijah said, heading for the door. "Kitchen in the main house is stocked, but we'll make a list of what you need. Expect 4 for breakfast at sunrise, dinner at noon, supper at sundown." "Mr. Freeman," Catherine called as he reached the door. "Thank you. Not many would have taken a chance on a woman with 3 children." He paused, his hand on the doorframe. "Mrs. Whitaker, I learned long ago not to judge anyone's worth by what others might see as limitations." His normally stern expression softened momentarily. We all deserve a chance to prove ourselves. With that, he was gone, leaving Catherine standing in her new home, hope and fear warring within her heart. You're watching The Black Rancher, where we bring to life the untold stories of America's frontier heroes. If you're captivated by Elijah and Catherine's journey so far, just wait. The challenges they're about to face will test everything they believe about trust, courage, and redemption. Hit that subscribe button now and share this video with someone who appreciates powerful stories of triumph against impossible odds. And remember, history is written by the victors, but The Black Rancher tells the stories of those who truly built America. Now let's return to Stone Ridge Ranch, where Catherine's mysterious past is about to catch up with her in ways no one could have predicted. By the end of the first week, Catherine had transformed the main house kitchen into a domain of mouth-watering aromas and hearty meals that had the ranch hands singing her praises. James shadowed Charlie and Miguel, learning about horses and cattle with insatiable curiosity. Ruth had discovered the chicken coop and took her egg-gathering duties with solemn responsibility, while little Thomas toddled after Elijah whenever the rancher was within sight. On the 7th morning, Elijah found Catherine already at work in the kitchen before dawn, kneading bread dough with practiced movements. "You're up early," he observed, pouring himself coffee from the pot she always had ready. "Couldn't sleep," she admitted, not looking up from her work. "Been thinking too much." Elijah leaned against the doorframe, studying her. In just a week, color had returned to her cheeks, and though still slender, she no longer had the desperate look of someone on the edge of collapse. "Ranch life agrees with you," he commented. She smiled faintly. "It's not the ranch so much as the security, knowing the children have food and shelter." She paused, then added quietly, "And safety, Mrs. Whitaker," Elijah said carefully. "I don't pry into folks' business, but if there's trouble following you, I need to know what my ranch might be facing." Her hands stilled in the dough. For a long moment, she was silent. "My husband wasn't just a farmer," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He worked for the Pinkerton Detective Agency, undercover." Elijah's expression remained neutral, though his interest sharpened. "He was investigating a counterfeiting ring in St. Louis. Got too close. They killed him, made it look like consumption, but I found his notes." Her hands trembled slightly as she resumed kneading. "He'd identified them all, names, locations, everything. I took his evidence and went to his Pinkerton contact, but 2 days later our house was burned to the ground while we slept." "You escaped?" "Barely. They think I have Robert's notes. They think I know names." She looked up at him, fear and determination mingling in her gaze. "I don't. I gave everything to the agency, but these men won't believe that, and they won't stop until they're sure." Elijah absorbed this in silence, his mind working through the implications. "Anyone come looking for you between Missouri and here?" She nodded. "Denver. I saw one of them asking questions at the hotel where we stayed. That's why we left so quickly, took the stage south instead of west as we'd planned." "Description?" "Tall man, scar through his right eyebrow, always wears a green vest." Elijah's jaw tightened. "Martin Reeves. He was in Copper Springs 2 days before you arrived, asking about newcomers." Catherine's face drained of color. "Then they're already here. We have to leave. I can't bring this danger to you." "No," Elijah said firmly. "Running keeps you visible. Staying put, keeping quiet. That's your best chance." He straightened up. "Stone Ridge is 15 miles from town with clear sight lines in every direction. No one approaches without us knowing." "These are dangerous men, Mr. Freeman." "So am I when necessary," he replied simply. Their eyes met across the kitchen, an unspoken understanding passing between them. Both knew what it meant to be hunted, to live in a world that offered no protection to those deemed unworthy of it. "I'll send John to town more often. He has friends among the Navajo. They'll know if strangers are asking questions." Elijah's voice was steady, reassuring. "In the meantime, you and the children stay close to the ranch buildings." "Why would you do this?" Catherine asked. "Take on my troubles when you have enough of your own?" Elijah was silent for a moment, his dark eyes reflecting the first rays of sunrise through the window. "When I was 12, he finally said, my family was running north. A white farmer hid us in his barn for 3 days while slave catchers searched the county. He risked everything for strangers." He met her gaze directly. "Some debts can only be repaid to others in need." Before Catherine could respond, the sound of approaching hooves drew their attention. Through the window, they saw John Buffalo riding hard toward the house, dust billowing behind him. Elijah was out the door before John had fully reined in his horse. "Riders coming," John reported, his usually calm demeanor tense. 6 men, armed, moving fast from the direction of town, 20 minutes out at most. "Crawford's men?" Elijah asked. John shook his head. "Strangers. One matches the description Mrs. Whitaker gave of the man with the scarred eyebrow." Catherine appeared in the doorway, her face ashen. "Get the children," Elijah told her. "Bring them to the root cellar beneath the main house. Charlie," he called to the bunkhouse, "get the rifles." As Catherine ran toward the cottage, Elijah turned back to John. "If it comes to fighting, you and Miguel focus on protecting the women and children. Get them to the cave in the northern ridge if necessary. And you?" John asked, though he already knew the answer. "This is my land," Elijah said simply. "I'll defend it." Within minutes, the ranch was prepared. The children huddled in the cool darkness of the root cellar, with Ruth clutching her rag doll and James holding a small knife Charlie had given him. Catherine sat with them, a loaded shotgun across her lap. Above, Elijah and his men took positions around the main house, rifles ready. The riders appeared on the horizon, silhouetted against the morning sky, moving with the confidence of men who expected no resistance. As they entered the property, Elijah stepped onto the porch, his rifle visible but not aimed. "That's far enough," he called when they were within earshot. The riders slowed, clearly surprised to find the ranch defended. The leader, unmistakably Martin Reeves with his scarred eyebrow, raised a hand to halt his companions. "We're looking for a woman and 3 children," Reeves called. "Catherine Whitaker. We have business with her." "No one by that name here," Elijah replied evenly. Reeves smiled unpleasantly. "Now, that's interesting, because we tracked her stage ticket to Copper Springs, and several people in town mentioned a widow with children who rode out with you, Freeman. Whoever you're looking for, they're not here. This is private property. I suggest you move on." One of the other riders spat and muttered something Elijah couldn't hear, but Reeves's next words were clear enough. "Look here, boy," he said, the racial slur deliberate. "We don't want trouble with you. Just hand over the woman and her brats, and we'll be on our way." Elijah's expression didn't change, but his finger moved to the rifle's trigger. "I don't know who you're looking for," he repeated, "but there's no one here except me and my ranch hands. Now for the last time, this is private property. Leave." Reeves exchanged glances with his companions, taking measure of the situation. Though they outnumbered Elijah's group, the defensive position of the ranch and the determined look of the men facing them gave him pause. "We'll be back," he finally said, "with the law." "Marshal Donovan knows everyone on this ranch," Elijah countered, "but you're welcome to bring him." With a final menacing look, Reeves wheeled his horse around. "This isn't over, Freeman. One way or another, we'll get what we came for." As the riders retreated, Elijah maintained his vigilant stance until they disappeared over the horizon. Only then did he signal Miguel to bring Catherine and the children up from the cellar. When Catherine emerged into the sunlight, her face was tear-streaked but determined. "We have to leave," she insisted. "They'll be back with more men." "No," Elijah said firmly. "That's exactly what they expect. They'll be watching the roads." "Then what do we do?" she asked, clutching Thomas to her chest while keeping a protective hand on Ruth's shoulder. Elijah looked toward the distant mountains, his expression thoughtful. "We change the rules of the game," he said finally. "John, ride to the Navajo settlement. Ask 2 Ravens if he'll take a message to Marshal Donovan." He turned to Miguel. "Check all the rifles. Make sure they're cleaned and loaded." "And us?" Catherine asked. Elijah's gaze softened as he looked at her frightened children. "You cook dinner," he said simply. "We make everything appear normal. And tonight, after dark, we prepare for what's coming." As they walked back to the main house, James looked up at Elijah with wide eyes. "Are you scared of those bad men, Mr. Freeman?" Elijah placed a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. "Being brave isn't about not being scared, son. It's about doing what's right even when you are scared." James nodded solemnly, straightening his small shoulders. "I can be brave," he declared. "I know you can," Elijah replied, and for the first time since Catherine had known him, he smiled, a full, warm smile that transformed his serious face. "We all can." That night, as darkness settled over Stone Ridge Ranch, Elijah gathered everyone in the main house dining room. Maps spread across the table showed the property and surrounding terrain in detail. "Reeves and his men will return tomorrow," Elijah explained, "likely with Crawford and some of his hands claiming they're forming a posse." "How can you be sure?" Catherine asked. "Because that's what I'd do in their position. Use local grudges as cover for their real purpose." Elijah's finger traced a line on the map. "They'll approach from the east, where the terrain gives them cover." John Buffalo nodded in agreement. "2 Ravens will get word to Marshal Donovan, but it will take time. We cannot count on help arriving before they do." "So what's the plan, boss?" Charlie asked, nervously checking his rifle for the dozenth time. Elijah pointed to specific locations on the map. "We don't fight them head-on. We're outnumbered. Instead, we make them come to us on our terms." For the next hour, they discussed strategy, assigned positions, and prepared for all contingencies. When they finished, Catherine put the children to bed in the main house where they would be safer, before returning to find Elijah alone on the porch, gazing at the star-filled sky. "Mr. Freeman," she said quietly, joining him by the railing, "I need to thank you. Most people would have sent us away rather than risk themselves. Most people haven't had to fight for everything they've ever had," he replied simply. They stood in companionable silence for a moment before Catherine spoke again. "James told me you smiled today, said it was like seeing the sun come out." Elijah's expression remained serious, but his eyes softened. "Haven't had much cause for smiling these past years." "When this is over," Catherine began, then hesitated. "When this is over," Elijah continued for her, "you and your children will have a home here for as long as you wish. That was true before Reeves showed up, and it remains true now." Catherine's breath caught, and impulsively she placed her hand over his on the railing. "In Missouri, people would talk about a white woman working for a black man, living on his property." "People always talk," Elijah replied, not moving his hand from beneath hers. "Question is whether we give their talk power over us." Their eyes met in the moonlight, an unspoken understanding passing between them. Whatever happened tomorrow, something had begun between them that neither had expected. Something that transcended color, background, and the social constraints that would try to define them. "Get some rest," Elijah said finally. "Tomorrow will test us all." Dawn broke with an eerie stillness across Stone Ridge Ranch. The cattle had been moved to the northern pasture, far from the coming confrontation. The women and children were hidden in a concealed room beneath the barn floor, a space Elijah had built years ago for emergencies. "Remember," Elijah told his men as they took their positions, "we're not looking for a fight. We just need to hold them off until the marshal arrives." By mid-morning, the dust cloud on the eastern horizon confirmed their predictions. Nearly 15 riders approached, Reeves and his men, joined by Crawford and several others from town. As they neared, Elijah stepped onto the porch alone, his rifle visible but lowered. "That's far enough," he called when they were within range. Crawford rode slightly ahead, a smug smile on his face. "Freeman, we've come for the Whitaker woman. She's wanted for questioning in connection with counterfeiting back east." "Do you have papers?" Elijah asked calmly. "A warrant signed by a judge?" Crawford's smile faltered. "We have testimony from these gentlemen that she's a fugitive." "Then you should take that testimony to Marshal Donovan and let him handle it legally." Reeves spurred his horse forward. "We don't have time for that nonsense. The woman has something that belongs to us, and we're taking her now." "There are no women or children here," Elijah replied. "Just me and my hands. You're trespassing on private property." "Search the place," Crawford ordered his men, drawing his pistol. "That would be unwise," Elijah warned, still not raising his rifle. From their hidden positions around the property, Miguel, John, and Charlie had every rider in their sights. The tension stretched like a wire about to snap. "Last chance, Freeman," Reeves growled. "Where are they?" Elijah's expression remained impassive. "I suggest you leave now before—" A shot rang out, not from the ranch, but from the ridge to the west. One of Reeves's men cried out, clutching his shoulder as he fell from his horse. Marshal Donovan's voice boomed across the yard. "The next shot won't be a warning." All eyes turned to see the marshal and 6 deputies positioned on the ridge, rifles aimed. "Drop your weapons," Donovan commanded as he rode down toward them. "Now!" Crawford immediately released his pistol, his face pale. "Marshal, we're just here to apprehend a fugitive." "The only fugitives here," Donovan interrupted, "are standing right in front of me." He nodded toward Reeves. "Martin Reeves, wanted in 3 states for murder, counterfeiting, and witness intimidation. The Pinkerton agency telegraphed a full description yesterday." Reeves's hand moved toward his holster, but before he could draw, Elijah's rifle was up and aimed. "Don't," Elijah said simply. Reeves froze, then slowly raised his hands. As the marshal and his deputies disarmed and bound the men, Catherine emerged from the barn with her children, her face set with determination. "Marshal," she called, approaching with dignity despite her fear. "These men murdered my husband, a Pinkerton detective. I have his final report with their names and operations. It was sewn into my daughter's doll for safekeeping." Ruth clutched her rag doll tighter, her small face solemn with the knowledge of the important role she had played. Donovan nodded. "The agency mentioned that. Mrs. Whitaker, your testimony will be needed to put these men away for good." As the prisoners were led away, Crawford glared at Elijah. "This isn't over, Freeman. That land should have been mine." "Mr. Crawford," Elijah replied evenly, "this land belongs to the person willing to work it, defend it, and love it. It was never yours to claim." After the marshal and his deputies departed with their prisoners, a profound silence settled over the ranch. The danger had passed, but the future remained uncertain. That evening, as the sun set in a blaze of orange and purple, Catherine found Elijah sitting on the porch steps, watching James attempt to ride one of the gentler horses under Miguel's watchful guidance. "He's a natural," Elijah commented as she sat beside him. "He admires you," Catherine said softly. "They all do, as do I." Elijah turned to look at her, his dark eyes thoughtful. "What will you do now?" "You're free to go anywhere. Start fresh." Catherine gazed out at the ranch, at Ruth feeding chickens, at Thomas toddling after Charlie with delighted giggles, at James proudly sitting tall in the saddle. "I think," she said carefully, "we've finally found our home, if you'll have us." Elijah was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable in the fading light. "When I built this house," he finally said, "I made it large enough for a family I never thought I'd have. 5 bedrooms for a man who sleeps alone." He turned to meet her gaze directly. "This land has given me everything except someone to share it with." "People will talk," Catherine reminded him gently. "Let them," Elijah replied, the hint of a smile touching his lips. "We'll be too busy living to listen." As the last light of day painted the mountains gold, James cantered his horse past them, waving triumphantly. Ruth ran after him, laughing, while Thomas clapped his chubby hands in delight. "They belong here," Elijah said, watching them, "as do you." Catherine's hand found his between them on the porch step. "Then here we'll stay." In that moment, on a ranch carved from wilderness by a man who refused to be limited by others' expectations, a new kind of family was born, one founded not on conventions or appearances, but on the courage to recognize in each other the strength, dignity, and love that truly makes a home. This has been another untold story from America's frontier on the Black Rancher. Stories like Elijah and Catherine's remind us that courage comes in many forms. Sometimes it's standing your ground against those who would take what's yours, and sometimes it's opening your heart when the world tells you it's impossible. If this story touched you, please hit that subscribe button and share it with others who appreciate these hidden chapters of American history. Your support helps us continue to bring these powerful narratives to light. Leave a comment below, telling me which part of Elijah and Catherine's journey resonated with you most. Was it his defense of his hard-earned land, her protection of her children, or the family they forged against all odds? Thank you for joining me at the Black Rancher, where we honor the forgotten heroes who truly built this nation. Until next time, remember, our history is richer, braver, and more diverse than we've been taught. God bless, and I'll see you in the next story.